Dr. Dorador. In our working group, we have prepared a few questions that would like you to address and comment on today. First of all, the first question has to do with the current challenges in science. Which do you think are the current challenges in science in order to include other types of knowledge that maybe are not similar to traditional knowledge? That's the first question we'd like to start with. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Hector.
Thank you, Hector.
A ver, justamente el tema que tú mencionas es quizá un tema de
I think that what you're saying is extremely relevant. We are addressing it from the Constitution. I have led a commission for a long time, and now I'm doing something different. But it's called knowledge systems. That means that we are not just equaling knowledge to science. We want to include other disciplines, arts, humanities, social sciences, and of course, local and ancestral types of knowledge. This has found some resistance because we do live in a more traditional academic world, because people have told us that only science can create evidence. But the thing is that we can include also topics that are pseudo-sciences. We have worked on the articles that were presented and adopted, and this will be voted on next week in the commission. So hopefully next week we will have the first articles on science and knowledge in the Chilean constitution. And this is very important. I'm sure there are many Chilean people in this meeting. We know that unfortunately we are lagging behind regarding knowledge production. But we need to remember how we break away from our economic system that focuses on exporting raw materials. And this is because of a lack of scientific development. Hopefully, we will provide the foundations to change this. I am a microbiologist, that's my specialty, but before that, I am a biologist. I also like music, I like writing, so it's important for all of us to develop all our potential skills, and the education model needs to change as well. We shouldn't have such a specialized and strict program of studies, because if we have variety, we have a broader view of the world. And then you go into other disciplines, and from your own disciplines, and things are changing quite a lot, we can be innovative and we can exchange experiences with other people. And this is why it is very good to share what we do, because connections connections are created. I am in Antofagasta. There are not so many people who do research here, and there are many problems. For instance, we needed to explain what we did with easy and simple words. We have a special desert methodology, so it wasn't that easy to talk to other people. Our research team then is multidisciplinary to start with. We have geologists. It's all women, but that's just a coincidence. And I worked with an anthropologist as well, Bonelli, and with him I discovered in his method, I discovered social sciences and anthropology, and that was very interesting. This year I published my first transdisciplinary paper where we addressed a specific problem from anthropology and microbiology regarding micro disasters. And that was an amazing exercise. Also, I participated in the first study group created in Fundasis on inter and transdisciplinarity. I have participated. I was a member of the CONICIT commission before the current one, and I have participated according to my specialty as well. But sometimes we got projects, they were not biology projects, but they touched on other areas as well. Maybe they touched on maths, astronomy, etc. So I didn't know which group to go to. So this study group was created in order to address these complexities. We know that research and creativity are limitless. And the thing is that structures cannot cope with all that. Even in that specialized study group, there are very clear schools of thought. And what they do is apply a specific methodology within a discipline. But the thing is that there are new methodologies that are left outside or behind. And this is why it's so important to mingle, because it opens our minds. And it's very important to listen to others to understand there will always be people that have different opinions, and that's not threatening and it's not negative. Quite the opposite. So I believe that really helps us address these challenges. We have such complex challenges in society, and the only thing that we can do is to address this complexity. And complexity entails inter and transdisciplinarity. So from the Constitution, this sounds so abstract, but we have included it there. We talked about epistemic justice, and also including indigenous peoples has been very useful, because when we talk about this kind of justice, you always think about ancestral knowledges that are disregarded. And we're not talking about making different types of knowledge equal. For instance, what happens with medicinal herbs. It's not like Western science is going to take all the bioactive compounds and say that this is a painkiller or not. That's not the case. The idea is to actually have real communication. That's not going to be easy. But if we include it in the Constitution, that's a great first step. So I think that the future for Chile and for other countries is very interesting regarding climate change in particular, because we need to address these topics. Also considering what people think and how they see their environment. This is why they need other tools that they're not used to implementing. Thank you. Therefore, there is a transdisciplinary challenge in science, especially in the Chilean context, regarding what's happening now. And in this sense, how do we revitalize and increase the participation of minorities, such as indigenous peoples, in scientific production in Chile? How can we also increase women's participation in these platforms? Okay, it's something that happens in Chile, but around the world. It's a lack of diversity in research. Maybe this happened many years ago, decades ago, because of lack of women, but it's not just women, actually. When we look at the cross-sectional side of things, these are, because when you look at Europe and North America, it's one thing, but it's maybe there are fewer Latin women in research labs, so it's not the same. And you can see these on papers as well. There's quite a lot of literature. The order of the authors on a paper determines who, gets the credit, etc. That's quite, etc. And when we have, if you're a woman and also from a specific country or skin color, etc., then it gets worse. So what we do is actually consolidate the system by diversifying it. So in the case of women, we know that the system doesn't self-regulate. We need affirmative actions. And that, unfortunately, is still resisted by many institutions. There are still some people, for instance, some women can do things, but because they have the money to do it. But in countries like this, like ours, it's very difficult because there is a lot of poverty. We're not starting on an equal footing. And this has been studied. Maybe until your PhD, you don't see any differences, but then there are differences. You need to, overcome so many barriers, get your PhD, but after that, women find it very difficult to have a career in science. So we talk about historically marginalized groups or groups that haven't been considered, such as people from specific regions in Chile, indigenous peoples as well. Therefore, we also need to take affirmative action. There should be special programs to allocate funds to historically excluded groups. That shouldn't be an issue because what we're trying to do is diversify science. I think that also has to do with centrality, because unlike Canada, each state and province has a very strong university. The same goes for Germany, where I trained. There are autonomous universities that have developed every area of science, and things are quite egalitarian. But here we have 3 universities, and 80% of the postdoc scholarships go to these universities. So it's very hard for the rest of the people to really make progress if they not attend these elite universities. Already studying in Santiago de Chile is quite privileged. So first of all, you need to know which the problems are. You also need data. Any cause you fight for, you need to have data about. And you can also predict various scenarios and find solutions. In this case, what we need to do is to take urgent affirmative action. And you need to provide a lot of information that will validate the actions. Thank you. Now, let us now talk about the Latin American context. In this global context, what do you think about how one can achieve the recognition of how scientific production in Latin America can be internationally recognized? Because many of us Latin Americans have trained in these foreign institutions because of these barriers you mentioned. So what do you think about this? How can we make progress towards the acknowledgement of Latin American scientific production, but globally? I think there are different ways to do this. As I said before, we need to communicate the problem. I think that's something like eight years ago, Nature published a report showing science in Latin America. It was a cover story. And at the time, there was a Latin journalist. I don't remember where he was from. Might have been Ecuador, but he trained in the United States. But you know, he worked there and he researched many scientists. And it was amazing because like people found out that there was science production in Latin America as well. And thanks to all of us who have become Latin American science ambassadors in a way, then we share our science in our own universities. This has, in the long term, created greater awareness among international scientific societies, especially regarding diversity. Many people don't remember this. I am the South American representative of the International Microbial Ecology Association, which is the most important institution on the topic. And a few years ago, they addressed this policy as well. On their board of directors, they wanted to have people from every continent, and that actually gives local science visibility. Because another problem is, colonialism in research. There are many areas of research in our countries, but that actually take place here, but are developed in other countries. They get funding from the States or Europe to come to work in our countries. And they do so without having any kind of connection with a local researcher or local institution. That's the case in Chile, because we have no laws that protect even the intellectual property of the resources. In Brazil or in Ecuador, you cannot take samples, actually, but in Chile, we are not protected. Anyone can come here and take samples. The only regulation we have applies to protected areas. It's not that it's wrong, but I think we should have more regulation. I'm not against foreigners conducting research here, that's fine. But they should get in touch with local people, because a lot of knowledge is produced and we know nothing about it. And when we make decisions, we cannot resort to that knowledge. And there are people who are more nationalistic, and they want to do everything themselves. I believe we need to cooperate. So first of all, we need to demand that there must be a connection with some sort of connection with the countries. The Nagoya Protocol kind of sets forth something like that, but Chile does not apply it. Last week, President Boric actually signed a bill of law regarding the Escazú. So I think we need to be ambassadors and we need to tell people what we do. If you can, I don't know, organize a seminar, even if it's not, I don't know, science, hard science, because people pay attention to that, and then you can disseminate the importance of science, because really people don't know what we do. People have no idea that we have research labs, for instance, or they underestimate what we do. For instance, once they rejected our project because they didn't believe us that we had a massive DNA sequencer, and that's bias, okay? And bias is all around us. So in order to fight biases, we need to communicate our work. Thank you. One more question. We had one more question, but let's give the floor to someone from our audience. So I'd like to give the floor to Ana or Veronica again, just in case if we have questions. And if we do have time, we'll ask our final question. Thank you.
Buenas tardes y bienvenidos a todos.
Good afternoon and welcome. Are there any questions? Our participants, would you like to ask something? And of course, you're invited to write your questions in the chat as well. There we have Beatriz Moya. She has raised her hand. Yes, please, go ahead. Welcome.
Muchas gracias a quienes organizaron esta actividad y además quiero agradecer
I would like to thank the organizers of the meeting, and especially Cristina Dorador,
en mi experiencia, digamos, como
Because in
chilena,
my
dentro de las
experience
conversaciones que uno
as a
tiene, digamos,
Chilean and
en
in the
casa, con las
conversations
personas
we
que uno
have
quiere, con los amigos,
at home with the people we
sin
love,
duda, el
etc.
aspecto de la Convención Constitucional
The
significó
Constitutional Convention
diálogos
has,
complejos,
you
hubo también
know,
narrativas
created
desde los
complex
medios
dialogues,
que
also
ensalzaban y
narratives from
destacaban
the
elementos
media that
negativos que
highlighted
en realidad no
some
aportaban.
negative items or
Y en este
elements that
sentido,
didn't
haber
really
contado con el
help at all.
ejemplo de
And
Cristina a través de
having
Twitter y de
you
las
having
distintas
your example
plataformas,
on Twitter
de
and,
haber visto
you
esa
know,
rigurosidad
different
científica en
platforms,
todo
and
lo que se
you were
transmitía,
very
fue siempre para mí el ejemplo a mostrar
scientific
de lo que
mind
realmente era la Constitución,
has
que se trataba.
actually
Así que primero que nada,
you know,
agradecer.
supported the spirit of the Constitution.
Siguiendo con esta
So
idea de
first
la
of all,
comunicación
thank you.
y de los distintos
Also,
principios
regarding communication
que se
and the
han
several
abordado a través de esta
principles
presentación,
that have been
quería
addressed today,
preguntar lo siguiente. Si
I
hubiese
wanted to
un
ask you the
principio o
following.
una idea
If there were
que
one
se tuviese que
principle
transmitir
or
a
one
otros en
idea
relación al aporte de la
to transfer
ciencia y
to
la
other
Constitución, en
people
la
regarding the
Constitución,
contribution of science
¿cuál sería?
to
¿Cuál
the
sería esta idea macro,
Constitution,
esta
which would
idea
be this,
que se
you know,
quiere
macro
transmitir
level
a
idea
partir de
that
su
we should
perspectiva?
communicate, in your opinion? Thank you.
Difícil pregunta. Bueno, gracias por tus
That's a
palabras.
tough question.
Termina
Thank you
acá.
very much for your words, Beatriz.
Ay, se me olvidó la palabra. Golpeada, no sé.
Sometimes, I don't know, this is very difficult. Talking to you is amazing, but when we talk to people who don't want to listen, it can get very hard.
Lo que yo trato de transmitir, porque también es una cosa lo que uno piensa.
Also, you might have an opinion, you might be absolutely convinced of what needs to be done, but actually what we need to do is persuade those who are not persuaded. Many times we talk to the people who we know will listen to us and say, yes, of course, I fully agree. But actually it's actually, and that's fine because you can talk to peers, but we need to talk to people who have never heard anything about science, and that's really hard because in the convention I've seen, believe it or not, that there is this anti-academic spirit, anti-science to some extent, but not explicitly, but for sure anti-academia, because the academia is and universities are so distant from, you know, people's daily lives, so they see them as threats. It is actually, it's like, oh, these scientists who worked for a specific company and they adopted this law that now is preventing me from access to water. Of course, there are conflicts of interest, but we need to, you know, be aware of the problem. What I always try to say is that it's very difficult to have a political speech, but we do know, or what I say is that research is essential and science are essential for our future. We know there are problems in this, in the Senate, etc., and there are fights, but that won't change people's lives. It's more like a power struggle to see who is the most powerful. However, what we're trying to do is create the foundations so that the country can have a system that rethinks itself and that creates more freedom, so that people can have the necessary capacities or skills to face the challenges. Because historically we've had a dominating elite that tells people what to do, and that's not a democracy. Therefore, science is a tool that helps us strengthen democracy. Maybe people don't know that or don't like that, but we know that that is the case. We're also, you know, proposing open science. The data are available, they are translated into various languages. They have been written in a simple way so that everyone can read them and take decisions. I think that when we strengthen our democracy, then you know, everything is possible. Thank you. Do we have time? One more question. Mitza Gonzalez. Mitza, please go ahead. Please ask your question. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Hi, Cristina. You talked about music, art, etc. And regarding the Knowledge Commission, we need many times things are very compartmentalized. Musicians with musicians, scientists with scientists, etc. And that affects our ancestral knowledge. So our personal context is what allows us to integrate different areas. So my question has to do with the approach, because we know that education starts at home. So how can this commission of on knowledges actually address this? Maybe this has to do with the education at school, what happens in families. We should know that there are no absolute truths, that everyone has their perspective, and that every piece of knowledge is important. Maybe it's more of a philosophical question, but I think that in the Chilean context in the last week, we've seen the true influence of families. So how can you, from the convention, help this? Yes, we have addressed this topic in the commission, although it was one of the first differences we had when a group of conventionals actually talks about education. This is part of a new education that needs to open up to different disciplines, and it should also include new perspectives. But there is also a political issue, because once again, it's power and the Commission of Fundamental Rights, because there is education, but there is a teachers' jobs, etc. But still, we have seen some non-formal education instances. For instance, in the Commission, a regulation was adopted. A social leader created a volleyball school for children in vulnerable situations, and the situation was very interesting. The connection with sports is also interesting, and the same goes for art and music, and these need to coexist. Therefore, we believe that school is an experiential platform where children can have access to every possible experience. My school was like that, the Liceo Experimental. It was a scientific and humanistic school, but we had a musical training as well. And also we had arts, plastic arts, etc. You learn how to respect others, and then you get scientists that are much more sensitive and more creative as well. So we should base our work on that. The thing is that the Chilean educational system divides people, and that has already been studied, because it's a system that just wants to train a specific type of worker. Why are we cutting down on science courses, civic education, etc.? For instance, there's just one specific book for the whole of Chile. The thing is that our countries' regions are very different. Some students from our university in Antofagasta have never left the region, ever. And when you open up their world, well, they can't believe it, but they're already 20 years old, okay? We should start earlier. But that's definitely the way. We will provide some constitutional guidelines, of course, but they will continue working in this regard in the Human Rights Commission, Fundamental Rights Commission. The thing is that the right wing still insists on the parents' right to educate their children. And the thing is that we're basing our work on things that are now so old, and we need to do something about that. Pablo, please go ahead. Thank you. Thank you, Cristina. Thank you for your comments. My question is a philosophical or even epistemological question. The main epistemological question is what we know and how do we know it? So I'd like to ask you what you think about this. What do you think about justice, epistemological justice as is being debated in the convention? Because according to what you say, you talk about the importance of opening up access gates. And that's consistent with the idea that we can all agree, even if it's hard, but we can agree regarding what we know. I know a few things, you know others. We can have a conversation and agree and, reach a conclusion. I would like to ask you if that's what you mean. Or another alternative is that we will never be able to agree regarding what we know. So all we can do is say, okay, I like green, you like blue, we disagree, and that's that. We cannot have a conversation or we cannot agree on this, the answer to this fundamental question. And finally, and this is a question, I think that it is possible to also agree. Of course, we can open up the door to historically marginalized groups, but we should also recover part of the Western tradition as well. So the scientific revolution starts with Copernicus or Galileo, because they criticize authorities and tradition. In that case, it was a Catholic church. What do we know? Authorities and traditional knowledge was, they were wrong. And it's important to present evidence and data in order to agree on what we know. Thank you. Thank you for the question. When we say epistemic justice, it has to do with acknowledging different types of knowledge. For example, Elisa Oncono was the first one to mention this. Of course, the multilingualism in our country is very important, and that is now included in the Constitution. The thing is that knowledge should be useful for political decision making. In this case, we address things from a scientific perspective, and we complement it by knowing scientific systems, but we cannot address these complexities if we're just finding out what different types of knowledge is. Sorry, that's my kid. So in that case, of course, it's not just about starting from scratch, quite the opposite. I think that things are complementary. I don't know what's going to happen. Probably someone will have to focus on defining knowledge from an epistemic perspective, but I think what we should do now is open up to transdisciplinarity. I trained at the science school of the University of Chile, and it took me several years to, break away from this strict kind of thinking that you get at university. For instance, I could not write anything if not in the first person. And when I worked with my colleague, the anthropologist, he said, of course you can do it. That's fine. There are many ways to do this. But, it's like different objectives. I would also like to say something about a topic we addressed at the Commission, and that has to do with epistemic justice in a way, which is acknowledging neurodiversity and neurodivergence. We proposed a regulation which was adopted, and it is included in the draft of the new constitution. I think it's the first constitution in the world to recognize this. And it sets the foundation to recognize human diversity, and because we are so far behind. Usually university is seen as the odd one out. The idea is, to normalize our activities. Thank you. We have a question from the chat. Someone wrote it some time ago. Natalia Astudillo, she's a geologist. She has a PhD. I'd like to know which are the initiatives in Latin America that would allow us to create science for everyone. Disability, gender approach, elderly people, excluded groups, etc. I'm not sure what she means by initiatives in Latin America. There are, I don't know many, but there are very specific initiatives in some science dissemination or communication projects that aim to communicate the knowledge to people with disabilities. For instance, astronomy for blind people. I remember that project. There is also there are several authors, but I don't know specifically. But the thing is that yes, those topics should be included in studies programs. In Chile, when I was part of the CONICET Council, we wrote a final document in order to improve the gender situation, and also on disability and regions. Disability is a complex and huge topic. The thing is that people with disabilities, for instance, find it very difficult to access research funds. Maybe for people with motor disabilities, but not for people with a cognitive disability. Actually, universities in Chile discriminate because of disability. There is an inclusion program, but not all people with disability have access to the program. Therefore, we have a huge inclusion problem in Chile, and I think this applies to the rest of the continent, and we need to do something about it, because I think it has to do with rights. And this is also why we, have put forward this neurodiversity regulation. Of course, all constitutions say that all people are equal, but then they do not have the same rights. The rights exist, but they do not have the enabling conditions that are necessary, and that needs to be, demanded. There are no taboo topics now. Now we talk about so many things. Thank you. Regarding biodiversity and inclusion, we also have some perspectives from the South, and there has been bio-piracy. And there are several positions regarding the Nagoya Protocol, as you have said, and especially regarding epistemic justice and intellectual property. What do you think critically about the Nagoya Protocol regarding including the protocol, because some countries do not want to apply it? So I'd like to know what you think about it. Quite a lot of these international regulations arise from a specific perspective, because we end up adapting to what other countries decide. Several countries in Latin America, Chile as well, actually, the rights of nature have been included in the Constitution. It was a huge landmark. Ecuador, Bolivia, and now Chile. We acknowledge the rights of nature. And that means that we need to actually know the international regulations that address this topic from a different perspective, because Nagoya focuses on an usefulness criterion. We need to think about the cost and what is created here. The thing is that there are many new theories about nature. I don't want to judge anyone, but I need to say that things are very complex. Some people think that this is a way to build a society, and they adapt to things like, biodiversity economics. When we consider ecosystemic landscapes, it's better to preserve it. But in other approaches, nature needs to be protected per se, because we have, a very strong link with it. We cannot live without nature. In this sense, this is, of course, a critical position towards a Nagoya Protocol, but then we're left with nothing. So I think Chile should adopt it, but it should be the foundation of a change of perspective. And if from the Constitution we are promoting this type of principle, it will need to adapt to the current regulations. Thank you, Cristina. I'd like to be mindful of everyone's time. We know you've had quite a long day. Once again, congratulations for your achievements. I am from Peru, and hopefully this type of debate will take place in my country as well. I think they're very important. It has been a very fruitful debate. We're here at the University of Calgary, Canada, but many of us are Latin Americans, and those who are not they are part of other minorities, and we see the marginalization and racism in scientific production, and also colonialism and the intersectionality you have mentioned, especially as non-white women. And we believe there is so much to do. Some efforts need to be highlighted. We'd like to thank you for your words, for your advice. We've had a highly diverse group from different places because we're trying to actually show these changes that we need to implement, or where can we head to, and your words help us to continue working along these lines, because there is some progress. So once again, we'd like to thank you. Thank you to everyone who has participated. We will be providing you with the recordings in English and Spanish so that we can reach the whole of our Calgary University community. Thank you very much, Cristina. Again, thank you to all the participants. And of course, I'd like to acknowledge your work as a scientific woman and as someone who is actually impacting policymaking in your country and making room for other women as well. Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation. I also participated in a group like yours when I was taking my PhD course in Germany. We had an organization of Latin American students, and we also organized communication activities and outreach activities. I remember we had parties and stuff. We prepared typical foods of each country. But I decided to come back to Chile, and I never thought that I would end up being a politician. Well, maybe not end up, okay? Maybe it's not my final task. But it's great to actually take the necessary steps to change things. It's always better to do it than not to do it. Okay, I think someone needs me here. So have a great day. And, you know, don't get frustrated. Now I'm very busy, but in some time I'll be more available and you can contact me. And if you come to Chile, please go to Antofagasta. You can come to the university to see us, and we'll welcome you with open arms. Thank you very much, Cristina. I'll take your word. We'll visit you and we'll continue, you know, forging these alliances. And these networks shouldn't be isolated silos, but actually new ways to change things. Thank you for your afternoon. Have a great weekend. Thank you so much. Thank you.